Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I'm at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency over in the US. Normally, it'd be my boss, Alan Friedman, up here talking about SBOM, but fortunately or unfortunately for you all today, it's me. So pros are, if you've heard his talks before, it won't be all the same jokes. The cons are, I've stolen some of is
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being here. So SBOMs, they've made their way into the regulatory space. Through a lot of hard work from government-adjacent organizations. Just for a primer, a start of a 10, can you tell us how SBOMs work and why they're important?
I can, and I will do it with baking, because I love to bake in my free time. And so it was my birthday last month, and so I'm going to use a birthday cake as an example. So you, as a baker, make this birthday cake, and you bring it to your friend's party for their birthday. As the baker, you put it all together and are handing it over, so you are the software producer, and all of the other guests are your software consumers. You know what's in the cake. All they see is a beautiful cake, and they have no clue what's in it. And in this day and age, everyone has an allergy or a dietary restriction of some kind. So the easiest example is, so you know that people have restrictions, but you want everyone who possibly can to eat your cake. So you print out an ingredients list, that's your SBOM, and you put it next to the cake. So all night, everyone goes up and they check it and make sure they can eat it, grab a slice, and they're happy. Someone with nuts would go up and see, oh, it's vanilla. Usually, or sometimes, people put almond extract to enhance the flavor of vanilla. Can I eat this? They check, no almond extract, they're safe, they grab a slice, and they go about their day. The next is someone lactose intolerant. They go up and they are sad because, of course, there is heavy cream in the frosting, or a lot of butter in the frosting. And they say, you know what, it looks really good. I'm willing to accept this risk, and I will take myself home soon. And then, so this is now going into my upstream supplier analogy, which is two people go up. One is gluten-free, so they check, and they're so happy because you used a gluten-free flour. And that means they can have the cake. They're so happy because usually they can't. But their friend goes, I'm allergic to xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is a common binding agent in gluten-free flour alternatives. And you didn't say if there's xanthan gum in it, but they know that often that is in the one-to-one substitutes. So they go and find you and they say, what did you put in this? And you're like, oh, I have no clue. I grabbed a bag, I put the thing in the thing, and that's where I am. But you can go and check the flour ingredient list and see what's in it. So that would be going to your upstream supplier and saying, hello, is this software component in my software? And because they have the ingredients list and the flour ingredient list was online, you can tell them, I'm so sorry, there is xanthan gum, and they are very sad they can't have your beautiful cake, but they are very happy they're not going to have to use an EpiPen.
Fantastic. I've never heard SBOM mapped to gastric risk, but it's an excellent use. Right, so a few years ago, we were all struggling with perhaps tooling and looking at workflow and process. A lot of projects these days actually have SBOMs. So as a consumer, I have an SBOM. What happens next? What do I do now?
That question makes me so happy to hear because it's a signal of how much progress we've made. If you think back to 2018 or even 2021 when the first minimum elements was published through the NTIA, people were like, what is an SBOM? We've conquered that question. Then, okay, how do I make an SBOM? How do I generate one? It seems like we've gotten that there are a bunch of tools out there now that can help you generate an SBOM there's even different formats now. And then we got to, do I need one? I feel like we're all, as a community, we're there. Where we are now is, I have an SBOM, I've done that much, what do I do with it now? And it's really exciting, we're starting to see more and more tooling options come out that are, how do I manage my SBOMs? What tooling can I use to map my SBOMs to each other? How can I use the metadata that's in my SBOMs to give me even more insights and turn the data that is in my SBOM into intelligence that I can use to inform my decisions? So I feel like as a community, we're trying to answer that of what can I do with it? And every day there's a new tool that it says, there's this data in the SBOM, we can use it for this. So I don't have the answer, but I feel like we're getting there.
The future is bright.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. Do you see a fundamental difference between an SBOM created for an open source project versus one that's shipped by a vendor or maybe comes as a compiled artifact?
The simple answer, or the ideal answer is no, there's no difference. They're both software. Everyone should have an SBOM. But the two different communities are coming at SBOMs with sort of different challenges and different priorities. In open source, people are very used to having full transparency, so you can have that communication between the user and the developer. So an SBOM is sort of an extension of that transparency and puts all the data in a very usable format that you can use for other things. Their question is more like, okay, I can make an SBOM, where do you want me to put it? But for proprietary software, there's concerns about, okay, if I generate it, the SBOM, how do I keep it secure? Who do I want to have access to this information? Do I want to people to have access to this data? What will they be using it for? How can I control who is going to access this data? So we are working with those questions in a lot of the community working groups that CISA facilitates. And on the plus side to the proprietary software question is that they're used to sharing data or information between producer and consumer for other products. And so, for example, in the automotive industry, they already have to share information between upstream and downstream supplier to customer. And so SBOM can sort of be slotted in there and be another way of sharing useful information.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So for very large organizations who perhaps don't have a full cross-supply chain, cross-environment transparency for their artifacts, how can they reduce risk for their consumed and ingested software using SBOMs?
I feel like the answer is it's limitless. The more information you have, the better informed you are, and that leads to more informed decisions. And so, like the person who, with nuts, if there's a nut in this cake, I'm not going to eat it because that's my line for how much risk I'm willing to accept. The lactose intolerant person, like me, I ate a whole pizza yesterday on my own because I said it looks really good, I'm willing to accept this risk, and I will suffer accordingly.
It's an incident at that point. It's a realized risk.
I accepted it.
So a fascinating development in US cybersecurity in general has been the advent of SEC filings as of December, I think. So it remains to be seen if we'll be able to determine some wider patterns as to what is the primary cause of breach or data loss across US organizations. Can you foresee a world in which breached organizations are asked or mandated to publish an SBOM, or if that form of systemic transparency, perhaps, dependency transparency, would enter the regulatory space as well?
So I don't want to comment on what another agency may or may not do, because I don't know the answer. But I think an interesting approach to how can we use SBOMs from a government space is the FDA is requiring SBOMs for medical device from medical device manufacturers. And so I think we're going to start to see how do you manage receiving a lot of SBOMs, and then what can we do with those, and how does that evolve both on the recipient side and also on the manufacturer side?
And that's fascinating, because once we get into sort of safety critical or life critical systems like things that the FDA regulates, then there is a greater sense of risk with a risk to life. Is there anything wider than SBOMs that those organizations can do that will bolster, say, attacks on SBOM generation or the signatures, storage, all the typical kind of packaging attacks that we have now that SBOM is also being treated as packaging metadata? Are there extra things that organizations can do to increase their level of compliance and decrease risk?
Some of you may have seen that CISA published a draft of a common attestation form that vendors who are selling software to the US government will have to submit. And Basically, it is asking software vendors to attest that they are adhering to secure software development frameworks, or look at the SSDF from NIST. And so SBOMs are not required, but they are optional for an agency to request from a vendor. But SBOMs also come in, I think, as a supporting mechanism for for the secure software practices that are outlined in the form, one of which is, for example, provenance, a way to make sure that you are making steps towards maintaining provenance is to have an SBOM. And so I think it's really great to see that SBOMs are seen not as just a compliance mechanism, but also a way of making software more secure as a whole.
And there's a fascinating sort of side channel question in there around how an organization attests to secure internal development practices without having those things maybe penetration tested or externally attested to. Do you have a view on how that is enforced and how that will stick?
It is not, or the form itself doesn't come with like an enforcement mechanism because this is not like a regulatory agency. But so the form has to be signed by, I think it's the CISO or the I believe it's CISO. But I think more importantly, in my opinion, is that it ties into this idea of secure by design. So instead of seeing it as, oh, I checked the box off once and now my software is secure forever, it's, are you embedding these changes to the processes of making your software more secure from the initial development stages of your software? And I think once we begin to reap these benefits later down the line, I'm very happy.
As we all will be. Right, so if a bill of materials for software is an SBOM, and then we've seen FBOMs, we've seen various other prefix letters that don't necessarily translate so well into British English. What do you think about the AI data supply chain? Is this a case where we can apply the same kind of bill of materials in order to try and work towards some sort of reproducibility guarantees? How do you see that playing out with regards to the work that CISA has done on this?
Yes, AI, the hot topic of the day,
of course,
or of the year. I think a colleague of mine, John O'Spring, put it really well in this blog that he co-authored with, I think the point of it was AI is software. It's a fun buzzword, but at the end of the day, it is software. So you should have a mechanism like SBOM or an SBOM for giving you transparency into the AI model that you're using or the large language model you're producing. There are additional, I think, parts of AI that you do need additional levels of transparency into. And so we're seeing the idea of data cards, for example, coming up. But I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is that as we're trying to develop these security measures for AI, that we're learning from the journey towards software security that we took in the software realm, so that we're not reinventing the wheel and saying, how do we create transparency? We know some ways that we can make these steps towards transparency. We might need additional measures that are specific towards AI and large language models, but we don't need to go back to the origin story.
Which is a great relief to us all. Okay, so what is next for the illustrious SBOM?
We have a busy year ahead of us in sort of 3 different work streams. I think the first is our community-driven work. So I think it's been shouted out. Perco's active in it. Kate gave us a shout out earlier in her talk, and Alan mentioned it. But we facilitate some community-driven work streams. They're led by the community. It's all volunteer-based. You just volunteer their time to talk about different SBOM topics and produce these documents that offer additional clarification and guidance. And we have 2 big community events coming up soon. So at the end of February, we have a virtual SBOM-orama. We had a hybrid one back in June of 2023. And so we're going to have a virtual one to sort of bring the community back together and have some time to get updates from the working groups, but also other governments, other parts of the US government, and just other topics that the community was interested in. And that will be February 29th from 12 to 4 Eastern. And we're planning a hybrid event, so an in-person component and a virtual component in the fall. I will have more details on that soon, but it will be in the middle of the country, I can say that much. So if you're coming from out to the US, you're going to see the middle. Then on an international front, we're making it a priority to set up a working group of experts from other governments so we can all talk through what we're working on with SBOM, what we're seeing, and hopefully that will harmonize how we all move forward in the SBOM world. And then lastly, from the US government perspective, we are working on an update to the SBOM minimum elements. So the last minimum elements was published in 2021, which I think in software security terms was decades ago. So hopefully what we want to do is have new minimum elements that are more reflective of where tooling and the community as a whole is today.
Well, thank you. I think you've covered most things, but finally, for an SBOM aficionado who wants to get involved, contribute, join the community, where can they find out more?
Email sbom@cisa.dhs.gov. It'll come to me, and I will tell you all about the different ways you can be involved. SBOMaramas, one of the many working groups. Our working groups are currently looking at topics like VEX, the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange. I hate that. So, thank Alan. SBOM sharing, so how do you share SBOMs from producer to consumer? Is there a third party in there? SBOM tooling and implementation, adoption, and also cloud. How do SBOMs apply to online applications in the cloud?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, and a round of applause, please, for Victoria.